Let's take a look at all of the records of the employee table. It looks like we have 17 employees. The first one is employee 1, Alex Adams, and number 17, Wendy Downs, is our most recent employee. She's still in orientation. Now, what we want to do is we want to create two identical tables. We're going to have an employee and an employee history table. Now, if I run the query from the second table, you'll notice it doesn't exist. We can confirm this in Object Explorer, showing we have an employee table, but no employee history table. Well, we could run the create table statement and then insert the 17 records, or we can create the same data and metadata using a select into statement, where we're going to select into the employee history table coming from the records of the employee table. Let's run this. It says 17 rows affected. Now you can see we have 17 rows in the employee table and 17 rows in our employee history table. Let's take a moment to add a primary key to the employee history table. Go Alter, Table, and the name of the table is Employee History. And let's add a primary key. And let's put it on the EmpID field. Let's run this statement. Now, naturally, that does not change the number of records that the employee history table has right now, but what it does is it prevents duplicates from coming in, and it does something else that's going to be handy for us. Let's look in our Object Explorer, under Databases, under JProCo, under Tables, and let's find Employee History. And as expected, there's this primary key we just created. More importantly, in our situation, is it created a clustered index, which guarantees that the employee IDs will be in order in this table on this field, even if they weren't inserted in order by you or the trigger. What if I inserted an 18th employee into the employee table? How do we keep the employee history table synchronized with the employee table? For example, let's insert a new record because we're hiring a new employee. Employee number 18, and that will be a Rainey Walker, and we hired her on January 1st, 2010, and she'll work for Manager 11 in Location 1, and we'll put the defaults for the last three fields. Okay, let's run this insert statement. One row affected. Now, let's look at how many records the employee table has. There's 18, and the employee history table has 17. There's a missing record. Since we just did it, we're hot on the trail and we know exactly which record is missing. But what if you inherited this problem and you need to figure out which record was missing? Well, you can always do a left join by writing a select query from the employee table, left outer joining it to the employee history table. On the EmpID field, we will get all matching and non-matching records from the employee table. And we're going to look for every case where the employee history table does not have a matching record. Okay, let's run this. Aha! Here's the one record that the employee table on the left has that the employee history table on the right, with a null, does not have. So how do we pump this one record in? We're going to go Insert into Employee History, run this statement. Aha! One row affected. Now let's double check. Looks like 18 records are in the employee table, and the second query shows 18 records in the employee history table. And there appears to be nothing missing between the two tables. So only for a short period of time were these two tables out of sync. And the reason they were is because I need to run two insert statements. The first insert statement puts the record in the employee table. The next insert statement put the record into the employee history table. As soon as I discovered the missing record, I went ahead and ran that second statement. What if I could tell the employee table, as soon as you encounter an insert, you should run the next insert statement immediately into the employee history table? This is known as a trigger. A trigger is an action that takes place after a specified event takes place, and the event will be an insert on the employee table. So how do we get two inserts to take place off of one insert statement? Well, we're going to set up a trigger. we're going to go create trigger TGR insert employee, insert being the action, employee being the table we want to monitor for an insert. And we're going to say on the employee table, after the insert happens, you're going to do the following code. Begin. We're going to insert into the DBO employee history table all of the values from what was ever inserted. Then we'll say end. Okay, let's create this. Commands completed successfully. What have we done as far as the Object Explorer is concerned? Well, there appears to be a trigger underneath the employee table. What's it going to do for us, and when is it going to do it? Let's test that out. We're going to say insert into the dbo.employee table the following values. Employee 19, which is Sandy Beckman, and we hired her on January 15th, 2010. For location 1, works for manager 11, and again the default values for the last 3 fields. Okay, I'm going to run one insert statement. Now notice the result pane. It says 1 row affected, 1 row affected. One of these inserts inserted into the employee table, the other one was the insert into the employee history table. Let's look at these tables. Let's go select all fields from employee. We're pretty sure Sandy Beckman is in the employee table. Yep, she's right there. How about the employee history table? Select all fields from employee history. And you can see Sandy Beckman is also in the employee history table. Sometimes you don't want a trigger to run. You can either get rid of the trigger or temporarily disable the trigger. Now this is common for test or prototyping data. For example, let's say I'm going to test an insert from a new process, and we're going to insert an employee called Dummy1, which is employee number 999. Now this is a fictitious record, we're just testing the data flow. We're going to hire this person in the year 2222, again not realistic but acceptable data for the data types. Location 1, manager 11, and all of the defaults for the last 3 fields. Now, as soon as this record gets in, you're going to delete it because it doesn't really belong there. But we're afraid of leaving this legacy data behind in our employee history table. So what we want to do is make sure it doesn't get in there by typing alter table dbo.employee disable trigger and then the name of the trigger, which is TGR insert employee. Okay, let's run this. Commands completed successfully. Now, when I run this insert statement, it's only going to say 1 row affected once rather than twice. Now let's look. Let's just verify that this does exist in the employee table, but does not exist in the employee history table. Okay, let's run the first statement. Notice we have 20 records, one of them called Dummy1. Now we're going to test the second table, which is the employee history table. Only 19 record, and there is no Dummy1. Okay, our test has completed. Now it's time to delete that one record from the employee table. So let's delete from the employee where empid equals 999. Great. The test is done. Let's open for production, and let's enable the trigger. Alter table, the name of the table, and we will enable the trigger, and then the trigger name. Let's run that. Commands completed successfully. Now future inserts will insert into both tables. I do want to show you that if you want to disable a trigger, you can alter the table to disable the trigger. You can also disable the trigger directly. You can go disable trigger, the name of the trigger, and then say on, and then the table name. Notice that with the trigger disabled, it won't function, and also you get an indicator inside your Object Explorer with this little red down arrow. This means this trigger has been disabled. Let's enable the trigger again by using alternate code. Let's say enable trigger, the name of the trigger, TGR, insert employee, and then the name of the table, on employee. Let's run that. Commands completed successfully. What is up with this red arrow? Oh, let's refresh, and now we can see this is an enabled trigger. Lab 2.1, Skill Check 1. Create a trigger called TRG Insert Pay Rates that takes inserted records into the pay rates table and copies them into the pay rates history table. Test your trigger by inserting a pay of $45,000 per year for employee number 19. When you're done, your screen should resemble the figure you see here, and notice you have one rows affected listed twice.